All right, welcome friends to the statewide All Aboard Ohio Zoom meeting. Today's February the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. We get two holidays this weekend. Hope everybody gets a chance to celebrate them both. Welcome again. We've got a very exciting lineup today. We've got a special guest from Amtrak who is going to talk a bit about Northeast Corridor, the new equipment that's going on right now. We also kind of get two for one. We've got our friend Margaret Clark, who's the Government Affairs Director for Amtrak, on the call as well. So if we have any broader questions about Amtrak operations, I'm sure she'll be able to take a swing at those. And then we're going to wrap up after our guests have to leave at about 10:40 with a 2026 update. This is our first statewide Zoom meeting of the year, so we've got a lot of things just kind of to put marks on the calendar for the first half of the year. We've got some exciting stuff coming. So you've been hearing my voice for a few minutes now. I'm John Esterly, the Executive Director of All Aboard Ohio, based here in Columbus. For those that are on the call, feel free to jump in the chat, put who you are, where you are, and maybe something fun about your year so far as we get into February. Looking forward to today. So again, we're going to be talking about equipment, particularly on the Northeast Corridor, that next generation Acela fleet. For those that are not aware, Amtrak has been phasing in new train sets on the Acela line. This is something that's been planned for some time and has been very, very exciting. I've got a friend who operates these along the Northeast Corridor, and he, refers to this new train set or new fleet as, European rail here in the United States. So it's very exciting. New equipment that is pretty fresh on the Northeast Corridor. They had their kind of maiden voyages not all that long ago in late 2025. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Michelle Tortolani. She is the Vice President of Project Delivery, Fleet, and Facilities for Amtrak, and is very, very well versed in the new Acela equipment. A little bit about Michelle. Born in North Providence, Rhode Island, has bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from Boston University. Fun fact, little piece of John lore, Michelle, that was my first choice. I ended up coming to Ohio State instead, and that's why I'm in Columbus. But
Okay, very good.
started in electrical engineering, and BU was going to be my home. But candidly, OSU made a better financial offer than BU did. Also completed the Wharton Executive Leadership Development Program. She has worked in program and engineering leadership roles across the transportation and defense industries, and again, currently Vice President of Project Delivery, Fleet, and Facilities at Amtrak. So, with no further ado, this is the fun time where we switch slide decks. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask Michelle to share hers, and we'll get going with her presentation.
Okay, so can everyone see my slide?
Yes, it came up quickly.
Very good. So good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and share a lot of exciting information with you. So let's see if we can get our, let's see. There we go. Okay. So I just want to really start off talking about ridership because that really has a direct connection with our fleet expansion. And right now, it's just really an exciting time to be at Amtrak. In 2025, we had a record year of ridership, and we're forecasting another record year in 2026. And so, as you look at how we continue to support and serve this ridership and growth, it's really key that we have a modern and reliable fleet. It's essential to Amtrak. And that all starts with the fleet and facilities planning. And with the planning that we do in fleet and facilities, its purpose is to provide a clear vision and picture of our current assets and a vision of our future needs to meet that growth. A couple of aspects and how it's driven. One, obviously, the capacity needs. More trains are needed to address this ridership growth. And it's also driven by the aging of our fleet and the impacts that it has on reliability, capacity, and passenger comfort. And then lastly, we really need to recognize and couple that fleet and facilities planning needs to operate hand in hand. So with that, it really leads us into where we are currently, and we are really in a once in a generation opportunity where we are renewing our high-speed fleet, our regional fleet, and our long-distance fleet. And as John mentioned, we launched the NextGen Acela in August 2025, and get into more detail shortly on that, but I wanted to touch a bit on the other two fleets. So our Amtrak Aero train sets, that's our regional fleet. We've ordered 83 Aero train sets. Manufacturer is Siemens, based in Sacramento. It'll support more than a dozen routes, actually it'll be 14. And we also have 130 options. We recently completed 4,000 miles and 200 hours of testing at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado. After completing that testing, the first train set arrived in Philadelphia in October to begin testing on the Northeast Corridor. We just received a second train set a month ago. These Aero train sets will enter service later this year in 2026, first on the Cascades route in the Pacific Northwest. Then they'll come to the Northeast Corridor in 2027. And then a few years later, they'll be on the Downeaster in 2030. And then the third fleet that we're renewing is our long distance fleet. That procurement is underway, and we are targeting to make an award in 2027. And then those trains will go into service in the 2030s. Let's see. So let's get into a little bit more detail about our NextGen Acela, which you all are here for. So as you know, this is our premium service from Washington, D.C. to Boston. Back in August of 2016, we awarded 2 contracts to Alstom, a contract for production of the train sets, a fleet of 28, and then a second contract for the technical support and spares supply agreement. That's a 15-year agreement, and it can be renewed for a total up to 30 years. As some of you may know, Alstom is a French manufacturer. With that, these train sets is a 40% fleet increase from the legacy. So we purchased 28, our legacy fleet is 20. And then what's also very significant with this new fleet is the increase in seat capacity. On a per train set basis, there's a 27% increase from 304 to 386 seats per train set. And then you couple that with a 40% increase on the quantity of train sets, and that's how you get the 75% increase in seat capacity. So this is really significant. As you recall the earlier slide where I showed the growth of the ridership, and this is really going to support that, that growth. We launched service on August 28th, 2025. We launched service with 5 train sets. Typically, when you're launching service, you introduce with a small quantity of train sets and then gradually grow that quantity. As we speak right now, we have 8 train sets in the revenue rotation. So we've already increased it by 3 since that initial launch. We are running what we call a mixed fleet. So it's a mix of the legacy train sets and the NextGen Acela. We will be running a mixed fleet for several months. We expect to receive the last production train set in September of 2026. And we expect to get to an all next-gen fleet by fall of 2026. I mentioned that Alstom is the contractor here. They are based in Hornell, New York. That is where the final assembly, production, and testing is taking place. Alstom runs 3 production lines there to support these train sets. Production line for the power cars, a second for the cafe cars, and then a third for the coaches, the passenger vehicles. Production is well along. 19 of the 28 train sets have been completed. Build out of all of the power cars and the cafes has been completed. So it is only the passenger vehicle line that is still ongoing. Let's talk a little bit about some of the features. And, one of the things I'm most excited about with the NextGen Acela is really the focus on passenger comfort and also the technology. And we'll get into that shortly. But as far as the passenger comfort, along the way, we've done a lot of focus groups, hear what our passengers are saying, what they desire. So some of the key features that you'll see in these new trains are personal outlets, USB ports, reading lights at every seat. You'll see the winged headrest as part of the seats. You're going to see improved Wi-Fi. As we do with the legacy, the NextGen is all reserved seating. As you board the train, you're going to see that the atmosphere is very light, bright, and airy. What contributes to that is the large windows that have unobstructed views. In the legacy train sets, there was a theme going down the center of the window. That is no longer there. So kind of a clear view. We went from curtains to shades. So just a really sleek view. We also streamlined the luggage racks. You'll see that they're open. Whereas in the legacy, we had the plain style of luggage racks. You'll also see that the cafe car and our restrooms are all fully accessible. So let's talk a little bit about the technology. I mean, there's really been a lot of advancements and advantages that we've taken with these trains. First, you'll see an improved public address system that's going to provide real-time information. There's also an active tilting technology that has been incorporated to improve the customer comfort and experience. One of the really key aspects of the technology has been the articulated train set architecture. So what is that? That is a shared bogie frame structure between cars. The bogie frame is what attaches the wheels and the axles to the base of the train cars. So with an articulated technology architecture, you have a shared bogie frame between the cars. And what this does is it reduces the individual movement of each car and creates a more stable feel for the passenger. So when you're in the train, you'll see as you move from car to car, it's very level footing, and you're going to see that benefit in that smoother ride. In the area of innovation and particularly sustainability, you're going to see that there's reduced energy consumption by 20%. So what contributes to that? Key to this is the lighter overall weight of the equipment. So with these new trains, the power car is made of carbon steel. The coaches are made of aluminum. The legacy train sets were stainless steel. And to give you a perspective of the weight difference, the legacy trains are 585 tons. The NextGen Acela are 499. The seats are also constructed from recycled leather. When you get to the cafe car, you're going to see that the cafe car has really been streamlined with a focus on how does the flow of traffic move through the cafe car. So at one end, you're going to see where all of the food selections are, the grab and go, the traditional counter where you get the hot selections. You're going to see the digital displays. And then as you move through the cafe car to the opposite end of the car, you're going to see what we call a nested standing room. So there is no longer seated tables. It's a nested standing area. And this was in response to some of the focus groups and feedback that we have gotten. And so the intent is there that people would stand and mingle, as they had their coffee and food. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the economic impact. As you can imagine, with a project this complex and this large, it has an extensive economic impact. The components that make up the NextGen Acela train are 95% domestically sourced components. The only one that is not is the car shell. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of suppliers that support the build out of those components, approximately 180 plus suppliers that stretched across 29 states and 137 communities. What these suppliers were involved in: technology transfer, buildup of components and subsystems, test of those components and subsystems, and then quality control. From a jobs perspective, created 15,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs. And then if you look at the impact to Alstom itself, created jobs for approximately 1,200 Alstom employees over the life of the project. Further down in the slide, I've got some dollar figures with the investment that Alstom has made in Hornell, New York. If any of you have been to Hornell, New York, it is really an Alstom town there. And most recently, Alstom made another key investment about a year ago, adding another plant such that they can now build car shells. So a really, really great impact to that community there. And then lastly, approximately $230 million of materials and services have been purchased from disadvantaged business enterprises and small businesses. So now let's move on and talk a little bit about facilities and infrastructure. I mentioned at the beginning of the brief how fleet and facilities planning has to go hand in hand. And then there is also infrastructure improvements that we make along the way. We have made many infrastructure upgrades, and we have many that are underway to really maximize the fleet investment. There was a number of upgrades that were made to our high-speed depots to support the NextGen Acela trains. Those upgrades have been completed. We have many upgrades to our maintenance facilities that are underway to support the new aero trains that will be coming along. And these are quite extensive. We have 6 level 1 facilities that will support the aero trains. And what we mean by a level 1 facility, those are our larger facilities where there is going to be both S&C, service and cleaning tracks, and M&I, maintenance and inspection tracks. At these level 1 facilities, we will be adding additional M&I and S&C tracks. The first facility in which the upgrades will be completed is our Seattle facility, and that is in September of this year, in line to support the introduction of the aero trains on the Cascades line in the Northwest. Then that'll be followed by Pencoach Yard in Philadelphia in January of 2027. The upgrades to Pencoach Yard are particularly significant in that they will support both aero and NextGen Acela. And then the balance of the upgrades will follow in the coming years. We are also doing upgrades to what we call level 2 facilities. These are typically smaller facilities. They're in outlying locations, and the scope of those upgrades are smaller, typically to support routine inspection and maintenance. And then along the Northeast Corridor, a number of infrastructure upgrades are being made. Our Connecticut River Bridge project is underway, remains on schedule. We broke ground there about a year and a half ago with our partners from Connecticut DOT. In New Jersey, the Portal North Bridge project, which was led by our partners at New Jersey Transit, will welcome the first train across the new bridge in 2026. And then in New York City, our East River Tunnel rehab team is rebuilding the 2 tubes for another century of service. That is well underway, and I had the opportunity to visit that site 2 weeks ago, and really exciting. Some of you may know that those tubes suffered damage from Superstorm Sandy, so that rehab is really key. And then this last slide just gives you a picture of the many infrastructure and facilities projects that are along the Northeast Corridor, from tunnels, just rail systems, doing a number of upgrades to our major stations, and then, as I mentioned, various rail yards. So with that, I will pause and take any questions.
Thank you so much. Brian, I'm going to have you maybe take control of sifting through some of the questions that are in the chat. I would say, we do want to be kind of mindful of particular area of expertise. So I think some of the questions I've seen pop up are probably broader Amtrak questions and not specific to the Northeast Corridor, but we can certainly talk about some of those. And then if anybody has a question they'd like to raise their hand, we can call on you folks and do that as well.
Yeah, I think one question that came up, Michelle, that you might be able to take, you talked about the increase in the number of seats and the capacity, but I think somebody was asking specific number of seats. Maybe if you happen to know, roughly how many seats are in the old trains and new trains.
Yes, the legacy trains have 304. The NextGen Acela had 386. So that's a 27% increase in seat capacity.
Great, thank you. Let's see, and of course, as expected, lots of discussion in the commentary about hoping to get more service in Ohio. in general. So I can't speak for others, but I had a chance to see some of the reviews on the Aero train sets
Yeah.
that were debuted for a media day or whatever the event was, and a lot of very positive comments on that.
Yes, we did a first look on Tuesday, and we typically do that type of an event. And with the NextGen Acela, we began doing first looks as far back as September of 2022. So similar to what we did for NextGen Acela, we did one for Aero. We had media in the morning on Tuesday, and then we also invited our friends in the accessibility community. And then later in the day, the CPRC conference was going on in Arlington, Virginia, and many of those members came over to see the trains later in the day. So yeah, really exciting, had a tremendous turnout, and we are all looking forward to seeing those trains first on the Cascade line later in 2026.
Another question came up that you might be able to talk about at a general level. When you mentioned the car bodies being aluminum, one of the questions that came up was, well, hey, how does aluminum hold up in the case of a crash? So maybe you could make some comments about safety between the older models and the new models and how that was addressed.
Yes, so really good question. And so I think a couple of things. The power car is not made of aluminum. That is made of what we call carbon mild steel. The passenger vehicles, while they're made of aluminum, it's a structured framework combined with the aluminum, and that structured framework is that safety component.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I think maybe some of the things that's come up in early Acela use is some of the doors and kind of the teething pains in the cold. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit. I'm sure that's coming up a lot.
Yeah, most certainly. So, as you can imagine, these next-gen Acela trains, they incorporate advanced technology. They're highly electronic, complex. So there has been some teething issues. And, I mentioned earlier that we launched with 5 trains, and that's specifically why you do that. These trains go through many, many levels of testing. Early on in the design and development period, they're tested at the component level, at the subsystem level. They then, a train goes to the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado, does extensive testing. There's testing at in Hornell at Alstom's factory. And then we do extensive testing on the Northeast Corridor. Once the trains do get into service, though, we do see some fine tuning that needs to happen. And there's also some learning curve. So now specifically with the doors are very highly electronic and driven by software. So we have found with both the doors and the toilets, you may have heard, we've had some issues with the toilets. So both of them have involved software and adjustments with the toilets. We did some fine tuning to the software. That software has already been rolled out to the trains that are in revenue service. For the trains that have not yet entered revenue service, they will be updated with that software before they're introduced. With the doors, we found that there was some points that needed to be further adjusted with the torquing, and also that software needs to be updated. As you can imagine, there's many doors in the train, so those updates are done on a by-car basis. So that takes a little bit longer. and those are typically done when the trains are in layovers between trips. So those are being addressed. We are working, in fact, it is my team, operations and our product team are working very closely with Alstom to address these issues effectively and efficiently.
Great, thank you. I think another question that has been discussed. Oh, actually, one just popped into the chat that I know is top of a lot of people's minds. With the introduction of both the new Arrows and the new Acelas, can you talk a little bit about the plans for both the existing Acela fleet when it retires, and then the Am fleets and other things that the Arrows will replace?
Yeah,
I think it
no,
might be
really
two
good.
different answers there.
Yeah, really good question. And I get both of these questions quite a bit. So let me first start with the NextGen Acelas. So the NextGen Acelas were introduced in service in 2000. But, when you think about the production time and the testing time, most of those trains were built, likely by 98 or 99. We're in, 2026, so they're almost 30 years old, reaching the end of their life. Also, many of the pots are becoming obsolete. So I mentioned that we have a legacy fleet of 20. We've already taken some trains out of service because of aging and extensive of the impact of that aging. So the current legacy train set will gradually, be pulled out as more next gens are introduced. As those legacies are pulled out, they will support legacies that are still running with components. And then when we get to an all next gen fleet, the legacies will be totally retired due to the fact that they're at the end of their life and have a lot of obsolete components. They will be graveyard. Some may be provided to museums or other learning environments, but they will be retired from useful life. On the Arrows, so we're going to see mixed fleets with the Arrows for quite a bit longer. So keep in mind, Arrows are going to run on 14 different service lines. Based on the quantities, you see a lot more spacing as far as when they were introduced. They're going to be introduced on the Cascades later in 2026, on the Northeast Corridor in the 27, on the Downeaster in 2030. So, you'll see similar mixed fleet, supporting where needed for components and so forth. But these fleets are getting to the end of their useful life.
Good, thank you. I think another question, and just maybe to add on to that, I think with the Am fleets in particular, just being very sturdy vehicles, a lot of us are hoping that minor service expansions could be served with those vehicles in the future. I think another thing that you talked about that I know there's been curiosity around, you talked a little bit about the coach yards that would service the Acelas and the new Arrows.
Yes.
Could you maybe briefly talk about which yards will service the new Acelas, and like what are the kinds of upgrades that need to be made to make that possible?
So with the next gen Acelas, the yards that support the next gen Acela are Ivy City Depot, which is in the Washington D.C. area, our Sunnyside Depot, which is in New York, our Southampton in Boston. So there was really minor updates that needed to be made to those facilities for inspection and maintenance. No additional tracks. The other yard that will support the next gen Acela is the Penn Coach yard. And that is really more from a capacity perspective. So we're adding additional tracks to that yard. And that capacity is needed so that we can get from 24 to 28 fleet. On the Aero, when you think about that capacity, those upgrades to the facilities are much more extensive. So our level 1 facilities for Aero that are getting upgrades are Ivy City, Pencoach Yard, Sunnyside, Southampton, Seattle, and Rensselaer, and then 16 level 2 facilities. So the level 1 facilities, the 6 locations I just mentioned, each of those facilities are getting additional maintenance and cleaning and servicing and inspection tracks. Some are getting a couple of each. Others might be getting, 2 M&I and a few more service and inspection. But those are really significant upgrades.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're close to the time that I was told is a hard stop for some folks. So let me know if that's something we need to drop. John, if
I
you have
mean, if
additional
there's,
comments,
one other question, I can certainly take another question. If not,
yeah, I think that the other question was just on catenary. I don't know if you're close enough to it, kind of fixed tension versus constant tension, some of those discussions.
yeah, no, I'm not as close to that particular aspect.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we really appreciate your time on the presentation and the additional information. And just for our members, I'd even when some folks need to drop, we'll stay on for a little bit more and can have some more conversation as well. But we wanted to express our appreciation for giving this overview of the new train sets. Again, for everybody kind of listening, and there have been many reviews on YouTube of both the new Acelas, and then this week you've got a bunch springing up on the Aeros thanks to the media event this week. And that can kind of give you that visual feeling for the new train sets that are coming into service. So we really appreciate the time on those. John, did you have any other comments here while our friends from Amtrak are on the line?
I would just, echo your thanks on behalf of All Aboard Ohio and the currently 36, but I think at one point we had knocking on the door of 40 folks on the line, so well attended. Again, just thanks, Michelle and Margaret, for being here, for filling us in a little bit on the Northeast Corridor. And for all of your support, with the relationship between All Aboard Ohio and Amtrak.
Okay, well, thank you, and nice to meet you all, and have a wonderful long weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Margaret.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, and then if any of our members on the line have other questions or discussion points for John and I, for those of you in Northeast Ohio, I want to make sure to call your attention to we've got a chapter event coming up here in early March. I want to say March 5. The Thursday we'll be at Lakewood Public Library talking about some opportunities around the RTA rail lines, of course, with the new train sets coming into Cleveland. Each of the other chapters have events upcoming in the local things, and those are on the events chapter. And then I think the big thing we'll be talking about here, maybe I'll just hand it back to John because I suspect he's already planning to talk about our upcoming annual meeting.
I've got a few slides to go through here, folks, just to kind of give you an opportunity to know what's coming. As Brian mentioned, obviously the local chapters have their own cadences and schedules. We'd encourage you to be active in the chapter that you are closest to. If you happen to be in a part of the state that feels like a chapter desert, We'd love to talk with you about what it looks like to start your own chapter or to, maybe participate in one of the regionally close but maybe not convenient chapters as well. So, again, we are into 2026. Thank you folks for your patience, particularly last month as we worked with Amtrak to make sure that we got, their support with this presentation in the Northeast Corridor. So this is our first statewide Zoom meeting. If you've got your calendars handy, we've got some dates for you to mark here. So first and foremost, wanted to talk about the next couple of statewide Zoom meetings. In March, we are going to be talking about, we're calling it Inside the Black Box of Corridor ID. We have done quite a bit of discussion here at All Aboard Ohio through these meetings, at local chapter meetings, across the state in our in-person meetings, about what corridor ID looks like from our perspective, but we really don't have a good idea of what it looks like from the folks that are hired by the route sponsors to actually do the work and actually do the studies. So we're going to have some of our friends from AECOM join us and talk about, in very broad strokes, what these types of planning projects look like, and then specifically corridor ID, what do these planning projects look like? So really kind of get into the details of what is involved from the other side of the conversation with these planning projects. And then in April, the timing is just about perfect. We're going to have some folks come on and talk about the Buckeye Train, the 250th Buckeye Train. I've got a slide about that, but as a preview of coming attractions, if you do not have your tickets for the Buckeye Train ride itself, my condolences. It's been sold out for a few months now, but we do have some other activities that are directly related to that Buckeye Train that we're going to flag for you. So as Brian mentioned, we have our annual meeting. We are doing a slight rebrand this year. We're going to be calling it the Ohio Rail Summit. And that is coming very soon. So I do ask, in all seriousness, this is probably a date that you want to throw on the calendar. We are looking at April the 18th. It will be at the Energy Advancement and Innovation Center at Ohio State University, which is close to, but I don't believe the same facility we've used the last few years. We're going to, in very similar sense to what we've done in the past, we'll have public officials, transportation professionals, regional partners. We're going to discuss all things passenger rail and kind of, again, get everybody focused on what 2026 and early 2027 are going to bring. More information can be found at allaboardohio.org/summit 2026. I would encourage you to go there, and as speakers and events get locked in, that's probably the best place for you to find that information. As I mentioned, we do have the 2050 Buckeye Train and celebration. Again, the train ride, both the Columbus leg on the 25th and the Newark leg on the 26th, are sold out at this point, but they do have events at the Denison Railroad Museum in Denison. Lovely place if you've not been there. They're going to have planes, trains, and automobiles. They'll have flyovers. The Goodyear Blimp is going to be there on the 26th. Obviously, the train component, they've got some equipment there on site, but we will have the ride coming in from Columbus and from Newark on those respective days. They've got car shows. They've got carnival food set up. They're going to have USO style entertainment. So quite a bit is going to be happening there at that Denison Railroad Depot. We are working very closely with them, and we hope to table at that Denison Railroad Museum on both days. So if you folks plan to be there and would be interested in volunteering for a portion of one of those days, we'd love to talk to you. And again, they will be here in April to talk a little bit more about what's going to go on there. And then lastly, this is Amtrak's 55th anniversary. Just today, our comms team posted an article that I've had a chance, I haven't digested it completely, but I got to page through it. There's a lot of facts and figures about Amtrak ridership over the years, a lot of good historical data. It is front and center on the All Aboard Ohio website, so allaboardohio.org. You can look for the picture that you have on your screen right now and learn a little bit more. Thank you so much to the comms team. I don't know if Ryan's still on the call. He was here earlier, but had to drop off. I think he's got some folks in town. They are working very, very, very hard behind the scenes to make sure that our social media presence continues to grow, that we've got active and timely posts on our website. All of the images that you see, they develop. And I did want to flag, we have had some changes in personnel right there, right in the comms team. And as you know, obviously, as people's lives evolve, they've got more or less capacity. So we do have some opportunities if comms or visual graphics or anything in that wheelhouse is something that interests you. Would love to connect you with either Beth, our comms director, or Ryan, who manages a lot of the social media and visual arts components, and get you on that team. We do have some opportunities there. That is a lot of words from me. I would certainly feel free to answer any questions that may come up and about anything all aboard Ohio related. So Jess, I see you first. And then Brian, if you want to maybe, I've seen some stuff pop up in the chat, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. If you want to maybe compile if there's any questions there that we can answer.
Yes. As just, I know what I kind of ask every time. I realized that last year was a state budgeting year, but it wasn't really, there wasn't really a big push around the new corridor ID funding. And then this year also, I think, I'll start over. Just basic updates about what's going to happen next. And so you said in March, there's going to be kind of behind the scenes of corridor ID. But as far as, since last year was the state budget year, as far as a push this year, for that to be moved along, I mean, what's the status of that? And is that going to be, obviously, I know we're still pushing for it, but like there wasn't new funding in last year's budget, but we thought it was still moving along. Plus, I think the BIL, the federal BIL, expires this September. And they didn't really, I'm not sure they really renewed it. I've sent some things in Slack about some things related to that RPA had, but it expires in September. I know they have to do more government funding in September anyway. Just both this, in terms of both state and federal, where do those stand? I mean, is it all just behind the scenes right now? You haven't really asked for, membership to go out and.
Yeah, so I hear a couple of questions there, and I think we can divide it pretty easily between the corridor ID state-sponsored component and the federal piece. So on the state side, we haven't really had a huge update because there really isn't a ton to update right now. All three of the sponsored routes in Ohio, the two that are sponsored by the state of Ohio, 3CD in Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit, and then the Midwest Connect, which is sponsored by the city of Fort Wayne and Morpsey here in Columbus. They are all at the end of step one. The step one documents have been submitted to and officially received by the FRA. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're in a holding pattern. With the change in administration in early 2025, the corridor ID program did have some minor changes. We're still very optimistic about R3 routes, but they have added an intermediate step between steps 1 and 2. So the three routes that I just rattled off, each has to do a little bit more work to get fully into step two. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the timeline right now. In terms of an advocacy ask that we would have of members, there really isn't anything to do at this moment. As you mentioned, the funding component was all last year. There will probably be another big funding ask in 2027 with the next state budget. But as of right now, we're kind of unfortunately in a holding pattern with not a whole lot of information to share. The federal side, as you mentioned, the bipartisan infrastructure or IIJA funding, whichever nomenclature you like to use, much of it does expire at the end of 2026. The Federal Reauthorization Act is being considered right now by Congress. Um, we have seen several different iterations of that bill. Some are great, some are good, some are not. And, unfortunately, until we really see a final iteration of that bill in either of the chambers, right now it's in front of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We really won't know going forward how things are. I will say, and take this with a grain of salt. What I am hearing out of DC is that there is no real appetite to cut funding for existing projects. And what I mean by that is if we're already in the midst of a corridor ID program or a corridor ID round, like we are with, the three routes that we've talked about, those are probably going to be free to at least continue through the planning process. Where I think the question might come up is are we going to start another round of corridor ID programs? And that's I think where we really don't know what the answer is going to be. Tom, I see you've got
Um,
your hand up.
just real quick, I remember last year was a budgeting year, but it wasn't but there wasn't like new corridor ID funding, but it's like that wasn't like the last chance, like maybe the next cycle is where that'll really be needed because we'll be in step two.
That's correct. So we did, just to correct there a little bit, we did advocate pretty substantially with our membership to uh, get complete appropriations for step two. We feel pretty confident that we've got those dollars earmarked. Our next big ask would likely be in 2027, and that will be for step three dollars as we go through that. But again, that's all going to be contingent on what step two looks like and when we are able to enter it. And that's, at this point, kind of in the hands of our federal partners.
And that's FRA, so it's not even like we really can move them along the way we might want to, push with if it was legislation.
That's correct. Yep.
And and sometime in step two, there should be some sort of public phase where we can talk about the specifics of what we would want to see in rail service.
Absolutely. So that's one of the biggest components of step two is the public engagement piece. And as we get a little closer to that, I'm sure we'll have opportunities, not only as All Aboard Ohio, but also as individuals to contribute.
Do we have any idea when the Rail Passenger Association event in Toledo is happening? That's like September or October, so maybe they don't have a save the date.
I don't think they have a date locked in yet, but yeah, it's going to be second half of the year. So, Tom, I think yours
Yeah,
was the
Tom.
next hand I saw.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's been any movement on the MIPRIC membership.
So yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with that one. We are working very closely with a majority member's office to get that introduced. I think just with the climate in Columbus, we've got a better chance of any movement whatsoever if it comes from the majority. I mean, I think maybe in the back of my head, we're going to give this member through the end of February to get it introduced. And then if that doesn't happen, we'll probably just reach out to a member that we know will get it introduced. And then we'll, roll the dice and hope that we at least get the couple of hearings that we'd like to get.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Good question, though. Brian, I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of sift through the questions or comments, if there's anything in there.
I mean, Marla just asked a great one, but I don't think we're gonna be able to answer it off the top of the head. Kind of just when
Yeah,
people say
let me
trains
kind of
are
digest that
expensive,
there.
when
I
trains
mean,
are
I
expensive, how do they compare that to ODOT? I mean, I think it's orders of magnitude less expensive on the trains, but I don't know if we got specifics.
yeah, I don't have the specific figures. I would flag for folks last year's annual meeting. Jim Matthews from the Rail Passengers Association sent us about a 9-minute video. Marla, he does quote these specific figures. And unfortunately, I can't recall them off the top of my head. But to your point, Brian, it is a substantial difference in, investment to move a human from point A to point B by train versus by car. And I think you're right. I think it is, nearly, if not more than an order of magnitude difference between the two. So, again, I think people like to say that building this infrastructure is expensive, and I don't want to say that it's not because any infrastructure is expensive. But when you look at the cost per rail mile traveled per person, it is substantially less than the cost per road mile traveled per person.
Okay. I just was looking for a general number, and we can talk about this offline, just so that we have a response.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to, again, it is in that Jim Matthews video. He gives very specific dollar amounts and figures. So we can look that up and share it in Slack, and that way we've all got it as a talking point.
Okay. I liked your wording with how much it costs to move a person
Yes.
versus, so that we don't get into the highway and the train track and all those things. So okay.
Thank you. That great question, and it's wonderful information to have at hand. There was a time where I had those specific figures stored, but there's only so much room in the hard drive. So,
Well,
Yep.
you'll have to use my
Yeah.
response. I start telling people now that my hard drive is full and I've pushed it to the cloud.
there you go.
Yep. So, hey, maybe Glenn, we'll get to your question in just a sec. I know there's been some conversation about politics and specific politicians, and just I don't want people to think we're ignoring those questions. But as an advocacy organization, we are nonpartisan, so we're not going to be taking positions on individual politicians. We are here to do our best to educate them and encourage and advocate for this, but we would not be making, I think, commentary beyond that. So hopefully all of you are able to figure out who is more likely to be supportive of what we are doing and go from there. So maybe we'll go ahead and go to Glenn's question.
Just a quick one. You guys got a Slack channel? I wasn't aware of that.
Yep, we do. We
Can
can
you send me a link?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not. My hesitance is I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to get that shared, kind of en masse. Um, I think Glenn, I will definitely send you a link, and then I think Brian, maybe you and I and Lisa can work through the technical aspects of maybe a QR code that we can share in our next statewide presentation to make it easier for folks to join on a larger scale.
Thanks.
Yep. Oh, there. Hey, Dave Thomas, appreciate you.
Yeah, so if it's in the chat, make sure you get it because the chat doesn't get retained. So if you're
That's
interested
right.
to join the Slack channel, go to that thing now, click on it now, get signed up. Thanks, Dave.
But yeah, I think we can probably pretty easily add a slide at the end of every presentation that's got a QR code that we can do that. So great. Any other questions that folks might have? I think we're coming right up on time. This has been great. Looking very forward to next month's. And again, make sure to put some dates on the calendar. Would love to see you at our uh, annual meeting in April. And then if you have the opportunity, I think, sorry, everybody on the call, I might have gotten the last ticket to the 250th Buckeye train. I wanted to get
That
to
was a
the,
while ago, though.
yeah,
had a
it's been
question.
a time. Yep.
I had a quick
Sorry, I didn't know
question.
who said that. Is that Mary? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mary from Youngstown. What do you mean by black box?
So basically just what it looks like inside the planning process. So I think we look at, when and that's maybe a technical term that I can flesh out there. So black box just
Yeah, I don't
means
know. I
that.
never heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah, so black box just means something that you really don't understand the inner workings of, but you take for granted that it is correct. So I think when we look at corridor ID planning, we look at, we reach out to, say, for example, AECOM or HDR or any of the other transportation planning companies, and we say, hey, we'd like you to plan this thing, and then 6 to 10 months later, they give us a report, and we say, oh, great, this is great. But we really don't understand the process that they go through to make that happen. So I think that's what our friends at AECOM are going to shed a little light on next month, is just from that moment where they are given the task of planning, 3CD or Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit, or even, a North Carolina route, whatever that would look like, to the point that they create that, 40 to 200 page document that says this is how it should work. What are the steps that they go through? So again, just kind of fleshing out that part of it. But that's a great question. I think some of us take for granted the words that we use are universally known. So glad to shed a little light on that. And I hope that explains it.
John, there was a question on what time the annual meeting is going to start on Saturday, April 18th.
I think TBD, but I would imagine it would be very similar to prior years where we'll have some morning activity, and then a luncheon and then afternoon activity for the timeline.
Yeah, and for those coming from farther in the state, I think we had talked about starting maybe just a little bit later to make it easier to make the drive that morning. So we'll announce that soon. Glenn, did you have another question? Oh, you're muted.
I'm trying to sign. Sorry, I'm multitasking. I'm trying to sign into your Slack channel right now, even as we speak. But no, thanks a lot. No, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. Great. Well, it's good to see everybody. I hope to see many of you in person on April 18th. And please do take a look for the local chapter events in your area, and hopefully we can see at some of those. But we're looking forward to an exciting year of events and activities. And we will go from there. Any closing comments, John?
No, I just want to thank everybody for being here. This was one of our better attended Zoom meetings. I don't know if that's a function of the fact that we missed last month or whether it was just the excitement about the Northeast Corridor, or C, all of the above. But would love to see you folks back in March and then again in April. So
rebranded, be updated.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Like
Good seeing you.
Every couple months.